It's on vinyl and vision.
Hello folks, thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 88. Tonight's very special guest is Mark C. Mark C is the primary songwriter, guitarist, vocalist for the band Live Skull. For those of you that are not familiar with Live Skull, they are this integral band that is kind of known as being one of the forefathers, one of the kind of like founders of noise rock from New York City. They have a massive catalog, and it's only growing. It's only still growing. They've reunited, and they are back at it full time. And they have a new record coming out, which is what Mark explains to me in our conversation, as well as some reissues that will probably be happening soon. There's not too much clear information on that, but so I don't want to speak out of turn. But if you listen to some of their later music, some of their two latest records, specifically their two latest records, I think you can probably hear a close connection to the album that we're discussing tonight, Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures. That's the connection I made, at least, because I know I've listened to those records, as well as trying to go back into the catalog and listen to some of the older stuff. And I do see a pretty good connection there. This conversation was wonderful for a number of reasons. First of all, Mark's got a very colorful and lengthy history in music. He's a wonderful person and very knowledgeable, great to speak with. And he actually also has a very great connection to Joy Division. Joy Division is one of those bands that has gone on iconically and has just, revolutionized music to a degree. Maybe in a niche of their form, like kind of goth music, post-punk, whatever you want to call it. They've been a massive influence. And Mark was there from the beginning. He really was. It was pretty impressive to be able to speak with him about this band and see kind of how he was there from the beginning, from their very first independent EP release of Joy Division I'm talking about, to the first full-length record being released and him being right there for it, and tragically had tickets for their first U.S. appearance in New York City in '80 before Ian Curtis passed away. It was pretty incredible, I think. So I think this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it very much, and I hope that you do too. And if you do, all that we ask here is that you please do all the things you do with the internet: like, share, subscribe, comment, rate, review, all of those things. It's very helpful to us. We do really appreciate it. And if you care to help us out in a more financial way, you can always visit our website, psychicstatic.net, and you can make a purchase there in our store. Our store also has a link in the description of it to our eBay page, which we sell there as well. Most of our new material goes there. All of the stuff that's up there is pretty much there, in addition to other things that you can't see, which is surrounding me. But yes, I understand that this is dropping on the day before Thanksgiving, so it's a little chaotic. I know I'm going a little crazy myself. So I hope that you guys don't go too crazy, that you're able to enjoy your time, either with your family or by yourselves, however it is you're spending these days. We wish you the best. We wish you a happy and healthy holiday. And we're slowing down now. We're getting to that point where it's the time for the holidays. So it's going to be time to maybe sit back a little bit more, reflect a little bit more, enjoy some time with the family a little bit more. At least I know I will. So I hope to speak with you folks very soon. It'll probably be a few weeks. And thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll talk to you then. Hello, Mark C.
Can you hear me?
Hear you. Yeah, I can hear you, and I can see you. You look great.
Okay.
And I see that you must be in your studio.
Yep. Out in Hoboken. It's industrial compound, one of the last remaining artists, independent business, industrial spaces left, and Yola Tango has their studio out here.
Oh.
Sonic Youth I think some of the members still have their studio, but
Yeah.
yeah, they had it here for years.
You're saying one of the last, I mean, I know what that's like. I know that gentrification and kind of industrialization in my city has kind of like condemned artists to fend for themselves in places. Do you feel like there's a threat that that might go somewhere?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're just hanging on to a thread here at this space because the the current community board happens to they I think they know a lot of people that have spaces here because people have had spaces here for years. But
Right.
as they get replaced with newer people that are moving into the neighborhood, then there's less of a connection. But for the time being, they're hoping to protect some of the spaces here just because that's it. Otherwise, independent businesses and artists are going to have nowhere to go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you know, you need the arts, regardless of what city you live in. I mean, you need some arts. So there's got to be some place for police for
Yeah,
artists
yeah,
to go to.
absolutely. I mean, I live in Manhattan downtown, and that's the only thing left are legacy artists. Either are so famous that they can afford spaces there, or they've had spaces since the 50s and 60s.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. There's some of those rent controlled places, stuff like that.
Yeah, and just people who were able to buy things back then.
Right. Those smart people that got
Right.
in.
I know. Well, for some people, there was just a matter of needing a place to work, and the spaces were affordable. People who were starting to do well, and they could buy buildings for nothing. And right in my neighborhood where I live, Robert Rauschenberg's building, Chuck Close,
Hmm.
Basquiat in Andy Warhol's building a block away.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, Francesco Clemente. It was at one time it was a real hub. Once Soho, because Soho was a little more pricey back in the day as it got to be known. So NoHo was just around the corner.
Yeah. Right. It's a kind of a tale as old as time, really. I mean, all these cities, they as they gentrify and industrialize or whatever you call that exactly. I mean, yeah, they tend to do that and kind of push artists and just with the working class in general out. So, but yeah, New York is notorious for it. I can't understand it at all. It scares me to no end. Like the idea of possibly trying to live there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for most of us, you know, either you got a space early on or you moved to Brooklyn early on.
Hmm.
If you're coming now, I don't even know what to suggest. You live with a bunch of people,
Yeah.
because even the outlying areas of Brooklyn now are getting pricey and hard to even find a space.
Right.
Where are you?
Uh, I'm in Rhode Island.
Oh, what part?
I actually live in West Warwick, which is a little
Uh-huh.
weird. I think our calling card is the station fire happened in West Warwick.
Oh,
Not obviously anything to be proud of, but it's definitely what people know it for. And yeah, actually, I live down the street from where that was.
wow,
Oddly enough, yeah.
amazing.
Um, yeah, I mean, I wasn't here, like I wasn't in this
Uh-huh.
town when that happened. So it was all pretty new to me when I moved here and kind of realized where that had happened. So
Right.
yeah,
Wow.
and you yourself, have you always been in New York or?
Well, actually I was in Providence for a while. I went to school in Providence, but when I graduated, I moved to San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
So that was and right as you know, punk rock was in a way, I don't want to say dying, but it was 1977. So
In San Francisco,
is when I moved to San Francisco, and that's when at that point punk was kind of transforming. But
right?
uh yeah, that's and from there I stayed there 3 years and then moved to New York.
Oh, okay. So so San Francisco in the '70s. I mean, I was just kind of discussing adolescence. So that was kind of '79, '80. So that was like the
I still don't know what to call that because it's power pop is not correct to call that,
Yeah, I know.
but
Yeah,
that OC hardcore punk stuff.
yeah.
So did you see any of that or
Well, I was seeing more of X, the
oh, okay.
Germs, the Screamers, the Dead. I saw the first Dead Kennedy show, Flipper, the first Flipper show.
Oh, okay.
Um, it was really kind of the first West Coast reaction to punk, but it wasn't really post punk either.
Right.
I'm
And
kind of, to me, it was a little retro in the sense that it was still highly influenced by British punk.
right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that was kind of more at least the bands that you've mentioned were kind of fit more into the stranger realm of like either noise rock or no wave,
A
new wave
little bit.
possibly.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It was, it was its own little brand. Actually, I should give it more credit now thinking back since we can't categorize it exactly. For me, it was seeming at the time a little retro.
Kind of the beginnings of of
Yeah, well,
the
it
new
wa-
punk, I guess.
right. I mean, yes, Flipper was influenced by No Wave. But when I first heard that No Wave record, the compilation, I immediately booked a ticket to go to New York to see what this was
Yeah.
all about. So to me, even though I was in San Francisco hearing all those bands, No Wave came out of nowhere for me. It was totally unexpected and not like anything really that I was hearing. There was this band, original band called Versus, which were just two women, a drummer and a singer.
Hmm.
And actually, looking back, they were in a sense No Wave in terms of being so minimal. Like Suicide being just synth and voice. They were just drums and voice.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I went to New York and uh, happened to see Teenage Jesus and the Jerks and Suicide. This is like 1979 at Max's Kansas City, and
Oh wow.
then I knew I had to move to New York.
That's what did
Because
it.
I loved California. I loved San Francisco. San Francisco at that time was totally affordable. It was the tail end, almost very bitter end of the hippie era, even though there were still some uh, coffee shops, etc. Uh,
Mhm.
but no one else had moved in to take their place, so punks had a it was almost like campus in a way. The whole city was just open, and you could get an apartment by walking down the street, looking up at windows, and you see a for rent sign, walk in, no money down, and take an apartment.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
unheard of.
yeah, I know. And there was the whole art institute scene, so there was like a little core of artists who and youthful energy that was kind of tilting the punk scene a little bit in an arty direction, which I found interesting, and include a lot of like hardcore performance art and
Yeah.
uh, really mixing of the arts, which when I came to New York, that was still going on here, and I still miss that to this day.
Yeah.
The
Well,
complete fluid mixing of all of them. Dancers would go to your shows, filmmakers would go to your shows, musicians would go to dance concerts or performance art. Now it's so all being back to segregated even between genres of music.
yeah. No, I know. And not to cause any further segregation, but I find it interesting. I just finished a series on noise rock, a bunch of noise rock bands that are doing the No Coast Fest in Texas. And so the idea of genre is interesting to me. And the band that you have been part of that will probably be speaking the most about, Live Skull, is kind of categorized or at least credited as one of the bands spearheading the no wave movement in New York, correct?
Well, I would say spearheading the noise rock movement,
Okay,
post punk.
sure.
I mean, no wave was kind of no wave was so precious and so specific in a way, at least the way I think of it. It
Hmm.
definitely inspired and influenced me. But frankly, Live Skull and hearing other aspects, which was not exactly no wave, but of the music scene in New York, like Len Branca and Reese Chatham, big big guitars. The thrust of
Sure.
the music coming from the guitars, and in no wave that was sometimes true. Um, but I think really it was the energy of guitars, and we had gained a taste for noise from no wave, so that when we played guitar, it was okay to have a very noisy sound. It could,
Hmm.
to us, it was musical because anything was more musical than the scratchy weirdness of no wave guitar, which believe me, I loved. But we were trying to add a little more melodic element to it. So I think in
Sure.
the fact that we were interested in atmosphere and melody, that kind of excluded us, to me, in a way, from being a genuine no wave band, even though us and Sonic Youth and I think even Swans are sometimes considered part of the New York no wave scene. And there's some truth to it. We were
Sure.
all following it religiously, and we all really were intrigued by it, but we were kind of
Hmm.
the beginning of the next generation. So it was kind of post no wave. And
Yeah, yeah. So you were right on the cusp too. So I mean, like,
uh,
kind of like your experience being in San Francisco and kind of like not knowing exactly where punk was at that point.
yeah,
And then the same thing. So that you were kind of living it and creating it in New York.
yeah. And
Wild.
and that's where, for me, the Joy Division album comes in, Unknown
Yeah.
Pleasures. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
so why when did you get turned on to it?
Well, I still I've been listening back to my original copy, which I bought in 1979. I actually
Oh.
pre-ordered it. There was a store in San Francisco. In those days, you could go in a record store and you could buy all of punk or post-punk. There would be 10 releases, and that would be everything there was. And
Yeah.
only a few stores would carry it. It was a specialty item at first, and
Mm.
there was a record store in Berkeley, and I was living in San Francisco, but I worked in Berkeley for a photographer, and a friend of mine, and actually my friend Jack Johnston, who was a heavy punk fan with a fanzine and etc., turned me on to this to punk and post punk in the first place, in a way. But he and I reserved copies of Unknown Pleasures. We knew about Joy Division from there were maybe two compilations that they were on,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and they were just the hardest rocking, but something different about them. It kind of reminds me of Nirvana. Like in the beginning, there were all these bands the grunge bands, but Nirvana, there was always something a little different about their sound. So the Joy Division tracks on these punk compilations were like, wow, there's slightly new sound there. Something's going on. So
Hmm.
we called around to record stores that even heard that there was a record coming out by this band, and we actually reserved. They got 5 copies of Unknown Pleasures, and we had 2 of them. And I remember driving over there and just getting this record and just
Yeah.
couldn't wait to
Was
put it on the turntable.
was that imported from the UK or was it a
Yeah,
US
yes,
pressing?
yeah, no, imported from the UK. The original, the textured cover,
Oh, wow.
um,
That's
and
that's a very valuable record.
yeah, yeah, I have a couple copies.
Do
I also
you?
have their first EP, which is that 12-inch EP. I think that might even be
The
rarer.
original one?
Yeah,
Holy crap. If you
when I
have one of
went to New
those,
York, yeah, when I went to New York, I went to Bleecker Bob's, which was the worst record store, but they always had everything.
yeah.
They would have like Sex Pistol singles for $1,000 even back in the day.
Jesus Christ.
But there's also a 7-inch version of that first EP, I think.
Well,
I,
that's exactly the thing. So wait, so
oh
you
yeah,
have the 12 inch
mine's a
version?
12-inch version, yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
That
Because
might be
yeah, those from what I know, those 7-inch versions, the original ones that they made
don't
like a
play
hundred
very well.
copies of.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I don't have one of those.
yeah, they
Uh,
screwed up the like I don't know if which point in the process of the vinyl pressing, but I guess the grooves were made too tight together, and so like it just sounds really. It's supposed to sound
yeah.
really horrible,
Wow. Wow.
and for the most part, they gave them away because they couldn't even do anything with them. I mean, they were so like I guess they were such a poor quality that like they couldn't really sell them. But
Wow.
now
And
those go for like $1,000 a piece.
sure, probably more.
Yeah, probably depending on the condition. Yeah.
But the EP sounds amazing. It has
Yeah,
that.
because
I
they
mean,
re
the 12-inch sounds amazing, and the cover looks beautiful.
right.
The Yeah, that I think that's why I was reserving an album because I just couldn't wait to hear what was coming next from this band.
Yeah. Well, and so what was that like for you? Because you weren't totally familiar, and obviously, like, in '79 when it's coming out for the first time, you only had your what experience with two songs on a compilation for the most part, right?
And the EP.
Oh, and you had the EP by
Rather,
that
yeah,
point.
the EP. But um yeah, I mean, God, there's so much to talk about that record, but I will say that right away, just picking up the object and seeing this black cover. At first, it looks all black, and then you see this delicate little graphic in white on the cover. No name, no record title. I
Right.
mean, think about the time period. This was a time period where punk was just like explode. The graphics of punk were exploding graphics, huge names, spiky hair, cutouts, black lines across eyes. Everything to grab your attention and just screw up the what you expect. And
Right.
then suddenly here's this totally subtle, beautiful art piece of a cover,
Mm,
like it just signifying that this is something unique, this is a gem, this is something different, this is going to be an experience that you're going to have to take in. And so getting it was just having the object. I was right away like taken aback a little bit, like, wow, this is more than I even expected.
mm,
And, and I opened it, and I was intrigued by this, industrial art and industrial music at the time too, which was kind of going on simultaneously as punk and post-punk, Throbbing Gristle and even Cabaret Voltaire and stuff. And this cover with that graphic is so industrial. And then opening it up, and the inner sleeve has this photograph by, I think it's by William Gibson, not William Gibson, Ralph Gibson, like a '70s art photographer. That's pretty esoteric. Uh,
hmm.
and so, yeah, the minute I put it on, I was just stunned, basically. For me, I was first exposed to whatever this later version of punk in San Francisco when I arrived there, and listening to the British 45s and stuff, and then it was starting to evolve. And with, for instance, the first Wire album, which I think was maybe '78 or late '77, and then
Hmm.
Public Image, and then the Buzzcocks. It was like, wow, something's going on here. The sound
Yeah.
is changing. They're not straight like Stooges influenced or New York Dolls influence. This is some other influence coming in. It's kind of an arty influence.
Yeah.
People are starting to think about the music, I think, and thinking about it as an aesthetic, as what do they want to do, and I felt Wire really started to break like new ground. But this record kind of puts it all together. To me, it's kind of like a defining moment of post punk because
Mm,
it has a whole aura that begins with the cover and then right with into the first song with exotic soundtracky noises in the background, but driving bass lines with the intensity of punk, but not so noisy and not so obvious in its character. It was
yeah.
like it was so soundtracky from song to song, and even Ian Curtis's singing style and effects vary from song to song to just embellish the mood. It's a
Right.
whole, and I think that's what grabbed me right away. I guess I had studied art photography. I come a little bit from an art background, not from music at all. I never played music until I arrived in San Francisco, and
Oh, weird. Okay. So yeah, how old were you at that time in
Well, I
79?
graduated from college, so I don't know what that made, 20, 21.
22-ish, maybe,
Yeah.
depending on what you were studying. Yeah.
And then a year of taking pictures of bands and roadieing for bands until someone in a band said, "Hey, why don't you join our band?" And I said, "Well, what would I play?" And they said, "Well, can you play anything?" I said, "No." But
Yeah.
I used to fool around on my parents' piano. So they said, "Okay, get a keyboard." So I started there.
Oh,
And
okay.
it wasn't until I moved to New York and then a year later that I started playing guitar.
Really? That's
So
interesting. I mean, that's a kind of a late starter for a musician.
absolutely, and I'm paying for it. I'm still paying for that.
You think
Uh,
so? I mean, you've
uh,
done pretty well for yourself, it seems.
yeah, well, I realize now that I've been playing for a long time that because once I started to learn more how to play, at least within my own framework of guitar, uh, you know, I've realized that the first instinctive playing was some of the most exciting stuff, and
Yeah.
I
Well,
realized,
there's something about that, right? Like the kind of like the primal instinct when you're kind of creating anything, any kind of art, like the kind of less that you know formally, the almost better for the creative outlet because there's nothing to hinder that.
right, and actually, the three of us in Live Skull basically were learning our instruments together.
All right. Well,
Uh,
that's like every good punk band, really.
yeah, like we were one of those bands, exactly. Except the drummer, who was an accomplished player, and that kind of kept it all together. But he didn't join right away.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah. So actually, I mean, that's something I didn't think about. So when I was listening to, well, I had just started to play music probably about the late 78, middle of 78. So by the time I heard Joy Division, I was always already transforming from a person that could listen to music as a fan and enjoy it for what it was, to then, once you're a musician, you can never hear music the same. You're just dissecting it and hearing for what you want to hear out of it.
Sure.
But I hadn't totally become a full musician at that point, so this album could still affect me the way albums when I was a kid did, like Dylan's Blood on the Tracks, or um I don't know, and Led Zeppelin record or something, or Jimi Hendrix, just full on enjoy it for what it is and let it move you in any direction without having to think about how it's mixed or how did they get that guitar sound or how.
Right.
So when this record first came out, I probably just purely listened to it for its end result. And I found that it matched so many of my aesthetics. I just have to say, I didn't
Hmm.
play guitar yet, but I loved Bernard's guitar playing. And now when I listen to it now, I still think it's genius guitar playing. It's melodic, it's rhythmic, it's not traditional in any way,
Hmm.
and it's totally based on building the aura of the song. What
Right.
does this song call for? It's not a matter of filling in the gaps of there's no guitar here. What chords am I going to play? It's more like, oh, there's this amazing guitar and amazing bass and drum riff. Now, what can I do to elevate it to the next level?
Hmm.
Feel like every time he hits a note or a chord, it's elevating the music. Each person in that band elevates the music up. So by the time you have the lyrics, it's in the stratosphere already. It's just so solidly based. And
Right.
kind of that's what I mean about it being kind of a defining moment of post punk, because it's so secure in its footing. You don't know where it is. It's like it like landed someplace alien. I don't know where it is, but wherever it is, they are on some kind of solid ground, even though they're still trying to discover and uncover the mysteries of music and their own thoughts. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
at the same time, it has this heavy grounded with heavy bass and heavy drums that just makes it a defining record of that movement.
Yeah, no, it sure is. And you said something very interesting as you were kind of like mentioning when you first got this record, how you made a connection to the other things that were going on around this time, like Wire, the Sex Pistols, forget who else you may have mentioned, but it's true how you were saying that there was a different element aside from the New York kind of New York Dolls, Ramones style of punk rock that these bands from Britain specifically were kind of like tuned into, it seemed. So like what was your experience with music leading up to when you discovered Joy Division? Like what were you
Well,
listening to and getting into?
well, let me just list a few. Fall Live at the Witch Trials, the first album, which was also, I think, 1979. The
Hmm.
Cure, Three Imaginary Boys, 1979.
Oh,
Gang of
okay.
Four, Entertainment, 1979. Metal Box by Public Image. I mean, to me, one of the most
Sure.
amazing all-time records there is, 1979. But, you know, Public Image started in 78. And I remember Sex Pistols playing in San Francisco, which turned out to be their last show ever. And my friends are like, "Aren't you going to go to the show?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sick of that kind of music." So I skipped it. But I didn't make that mistake when Public Image came. When
Yeah.
Public Image came and blew us all away. And
Hmm.
you know, Jaw Wobble getting up for 15 minutes before the band even starts and just playing repetitive heavy bass lines. You know, I think they were rediscovering, instead of just being about punk and rebellion and everything, post punk was rediscovering music from a different place, devoid of all the 70s, 60s, Motown, anything else. They were, but they were with the same kind of passion for trying to see what kind of music you can make and what music can affect you. And so,
Hmm.
and I know when the Fall was coming to San Francisco for the first time, it was, you know, their first album, tour of their first album. And actually, I got in a motorcycle accident a couple days, pretty bad one, before their show. And I made my friends carry me to the show. I was not going to miss it.
Oh
That's how
wow.
important the stuff was to me at that moment. I think
Yeah.
it was awakening this idea of being a musician in me, in a real sense. And I realized that even though I'm, you know, I'm older, I lived through the late 60s and early 70s, all the classic stuff, you know, records that
Hmm.
were coming out, the Doors, I love them all, you know, the
Oh,
Rolling
okay.
Stones, all these bands, Jimi Hendrix, I got to see when I was a kid, believe it or not.
Hmm.
But and they all meant a lot to me. But now as becoming a musician, and the music that inspired me to become a musician was punk and early new wave, you know, like Talking Heads and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff.
Well, did you
Um,
think that was there something in the back of your mind, maybe like the transitioning from the '60s into the '70s, and the changing of the artistic brain, let's just say, um, did you feel like what you were getting turned on to as far as like this kind of weirder, noisy punk music, it seemed more kind of attainable for you as a musician, like that's something I can do as opposed to like listening to Jimi Hendrix being like, I don't know what the fuck that is.
I know. I heard someone say something like that, but yeah, no, it's true. That's why I love the fall. I love the fall because such intelligent lyric writing,
Mm,
which I stayed writing in school, creative writing, and but I school was a dead end for me. By the time I left school, I couldn't write. I couldn't. I was at art photography. I studied as well. I couldn't do anything. School had just stopped me up. Punk was a total release. And hearing the fall, oh, these were lyrics. These were poems or poetry or lyrics that really grabbed me. And the music, repetitive, simple, it seemed attainable, just like you're saying.
mm,
I think that was the
okay.
fall. You know, the Cure, it was a little harder to follow as much as I love them, but the music's a little more complicated, I think. And then Gang of Four, wow, with like Damaged Goods, that single, it was amazing, but I didn't feel like it was anything I could attain. So yeah, the fall was the first ones that kind of like made me think, oh, I could actually try
Yeah.
music.
Sure, sure. And then getting into Joy Division, I mean, I think I was actually sitting with the record today, and I like the band. I've never been a massive fan, but I've
Uh,
definitely heard them over the years, and it
right.
definitely has always been something that's struck a chord with me, at least at some points. Like
Yeah.
some certain songs would definitely grab me. And so I was sitting with it, and I was just like, you know what? I should probably try to learn how to play some of these songs
Oh,
because they're easy enough, I mean,
yeah,
because I'm a
yeah,
bass player, and I was just
yeah.
like, the bass is the best part of this
Uh,
songs anyway.
great bass playing. Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah.
argue. Yeah, with those bass lines. I mean, uh, I love those bass lines because they are long phrases with strong melodies.
Hmm.
And if you have that to start with, you can just it makes adding onto it so much more fun, than something that's less melodic and less and shorter. Those are long swing, and there's like blues and soul and rock in those bass lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing I want to say about Joy Division is it's kind of like the movie Blade Runner to me. Now, if you look back on it, unless you're older, you probably don't realize that how influential it was on every single movie after it. And
Right.
that's the thing about Joy Division. You go and listen to it now. Well, a lot of people have borrowed from that record.
Oh,
A lot of
thousands of people.
people. Yeah. But when it came out, there was very little like that. Like I said, there were, we named them Metal Box, you know,
Sure.
Entertainment by Gang of Four. There's just and one five
And
four by that time. Wire had one
yeah,
four.
and
So
even still, they're not the same. They're
no,
it's like, I mean, Unknown Pleasures is still very different. I mean, yeah, it's a contemporary
absolutely.
to those,
Yeah,
and it's definitely kind of part of the whole post-punk movement. What would go on to be known as the post-punk movement, but I
yeah,
mean, it's totally unique.
that was yeah. I mean, all those bands were very different.
Mm,
And I think Joy Division, the really, I love that they go for atmosphere. It's so cinematic. Their songs are cinematic. That's why, there's those layers of sounds. The production on that album, even though I know they were unhappy with it because the guitars were so low.
mm,
And I understand that feeling being a guitarist totally, but it allows you to, on the other hand, to get into some of the other aspects of the sound. And there's a lot of sound design in that record,
yeah, that's a
which
good
for
way to put it.
punk, that's something punk had no sound design. Punk
Right.
was all about just like put your instruments up there, record them, and get it down. But this was so thoughtful and so atmospheric and so layered
Right.
that um I think that and this is me listening to it more and more now. When I first heard it, I think it was I just loved the bass playing so much.
Hmm.
And one other thing is where those albums I listed, Metal Box, The Fall, Gang of Four, with the exception of The Cure, but even The Cure then, where was the singing? I mean, it was perfectly adequate singing for punk and early post punk, but it wasn't knock you dead lead vocalist type of singing.
Hmm.
Joy Division, here we go. Here's a real lead singer. I mean, people. The weirdest thing for me was it sparked in England this whole movement of people listening to not Frank Sinatra.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because of this deep, rich voice. I mean, to me, it's more like Johnny Cash or something. But um, yeah, I think that was also the vocals. Here's a real singer, and not to have anything against those other bands, and actually, they all developed, but yeah, this was like almost, I mean, a singer in the traditional sense, but in such an unusual singing in such an unusual manner with such passion and a lot of
Right.
really dark vocal lines.
Sure, sure. And it is, I mean, the whole thing is just like weird and awkward, especially as a first time kind of like, I mean, in 79 when it was released, and this is like you're picking it up and hearing it for the first time. I mean, like, yeah, it had to have been kind of weird. The bass
Yeah,
line, like just the first song,
yeah,
Disorder, like that weird
yeah,
progression he makes from like that really high end to like that low note that totally sounds sour. It's like like it shouldn't work. All
right.
of the music shouldn't work.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it has pop elements in it. It has, yeah, it's crazy. And just the beginning of the album, I've been waiting for a guide to come and take me by the hand.
Mm,
And I mean, it's just like, wow, what is he talking about? Who's the guy?
right.
Who's that? What's that? It's like, right away the mystery that begins with the album cover, this black cover and this weird graphic, and then this photograph of a hand reaching out for a closed door down a hallway. It's
Mm,
all, hey, this is, we're going to present you with something that's not obvious like punk, that's not decided, that's not just screaming out. We're going to
right.
dig in a different direction. We're going to go more uh, interior. And
Sure.
that's the other thing you see. It's something I was like, what is this? There's an outside and an inside to the record. I know it's been done many times since, but I don't know how many times it was done before then instead of side
Mm.
one, side two.
Oh,
It's
right.
outside and inside. And I think, all the clues are there on the packaging. And I know Joy Division was involved in the packaging, in the design.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so I really feel like this is a mature art piece that is thought out from beginning to end and takes you on a journey that's totally unresolved, like all great art,
Right.
but keeps you intrigued all along the way and keeps pointing you to things without pinpointing them.
Hmm.
I think that musically as well as lyrically, um, that's why it just fit my aesthetic so well. I was
Yeah.
like, you know,
Very cool. Can you tell? I think we should probably go ahead and get into this record. But before we do, I just want to ask you one question. There's something I want to chew your brain about a little bit. Based on the whole genre thing I was mentioning earlier, you said that no wave wasn't really what you guys were doing. You were kind of spearheading the noise rock thing. But can you tell me what the difference between those two are?
yeah. I mean, even though if you look at the No Wave album, there are bands like the Contortions, uh,
Okay.
and they're no wave because I guess because the saxophone playing is a little noisy or something. But to me, the real core no wave for me are bands like Mars and even Lydia Lunch's early stuff, Teenage Jesus, where there's no song structure. It's very abstract. It almost sounds like unwritten totally.
Hmm.
And it
Okay.
can go anywhere and it doesn't need a single thing from music in the past. Nothing.
Okay. Just
And
no
then so
tradition. It's all
that's what I got from, that's what I love. That's the big lesson for me for no wave, that actually you can do that and still get some audience to be interested in if you do it in such a stark and grand and interesting way. And then noise rock, I think, takes some of the peripheral things of like I was saying before, peripheral aspects of no wave, which was getting rid of standard song structure and also allowing the use of noise. Noise, any kind of noise, can suddenly be as much of a note and a sound and a melody as anything else. So
hmm.
noise rock, then, it's, to me, it's people that are getting closer to a rock structure, medium length to short songs, multiple songs with ideas that are fleshed out and specific to the song and become obvious as you hear the song. With no
Hmm.
wave, you don't know where they're going to go in the
Okay.
song, lyrically or musically. And that's the
Right.
beauty of it. But noise rock, I think, influenced by no wave, but now bringing it back into the pop rock world of clubs and
Yeah.
you know
Okay.
and that's and so but that's my take on what no wave and noise rock.
Well, that's pretty good, actually. I think that makes a lot of sense. I thank you for your interpretation of it because, like I said, I've already been doing it, so it's just kind of nice to have somebody that's so experienced and so well versed in it to kind of really almost put that cherry on top of this series I just completed.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said we should probably just go ahead and get into this record. One of the first things I figured out or found out about this record was that little history is that it was issued on June 15th, 1979, as the first album release on the newly created Factory Records. Unknown Pleasures didn't have the major label support needed to complete compete with the mainstream charts. However, it sold 5,000 copies in just 2 weeks and proved
Wow.
that independent record labels could be viable on their own terms.
Wow.
And this is 79. So this is pretty out of the ordinary for the
Yeah.
time. So where do you feel like the industry of label in the music business is at these days?
Um, well, I mean, for me, the biggest change was when Nirvana hit it big with DGC. That's like the dividing point for alternative underground independent labels and then the mainstream getting involved. Um, they kind of they brought vinyl back.
Mm-hmm.
And and i think the great thing about that is vinyl is an object. It goes back to the point of this Joy Division album, that's an art piece. It's not just a record.
Right.
And I think indie rockers have been influenced by that now, and they want their records to be art pieces. And even big bands want albums because it's an art piece. It's a solid object. It's a
Right.
permanent object. And I feel like indie labels, and especially now, are really important in keeping vinyl afloat and alive, and keeping the factories open so they all didn't close and junk their equipment, which was happening. I watched it in New York. I wanted to cry. All these uh, pressing plants just
Folding.
disappearing, and
Yeah.
so I mean, wow, it's such a big question about labels now, because you can do it on your own, you can do it with small labels, but um I think you know there's still rec- indie labels that are kind of at that level, factory level back in the day, that are still able to pioneer new bands and put out music. I mean, commercial music has just gotten so far removed from this kind of music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to say about it.
Okay.
Frankly, when I was a kid, it was all one thing. We would hear our favorite bands, they would play it on the radio.
Right.
Dylan's like a Rolling Stone 7-minute song was a radio hit. You know,
Mm.
that's what's a shocker for me with Nirvana, because I was like, oh, we're never going to hear any. Look at how great this record is, but we're never going to hear it. And to my, I was wrong, obviously, in that case, but that was short lived. I mean, look at commercial music now. I think it's all
Yeah.
produced by the same five people and written by the same five people. And
Yeah. Yeah. There seems to be no life in major mainstream music, really.
yeah,
And so that's kind of why I ask. I mean, you have a lot of experience. Every record you've put out with Live Skull has been out on like some, very notable independent label, like Homestead and Caroline, and now Bronson Recordings is what
yeah,
you're working with
yeah,
currently.
yes. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much all I know. I never really was on a major label. And I mean, I find Bronson, for instance, they're so friendly and cool, and they're so into it. I mean, that's the thing. You can be on a big label and just be a number, or
Tax
another band
write-off.
on the label. But the great thing about smaller labels is you're important to the label, and they generally treat you that way. And so um, it's not like it used to be, where there was tons of promotion money, tons and easy distribution. Everything now is a little bit of a struggle, and everyone
Hmm.
has to work on it. You have to hand in a finished product. It's got to be mastered. You have to have the cover done. We record our own records now, at my studio here, and I usually do the covers or work with someone who's doing. At least I do the design,
Hmm.
and we hand in a finished product. The label doesn't is not involved in mastering. They're not involved with layout. They're not involved.
Right.
They don't even. We at the end of Live Skull, we were getting pretty large advances to record. So from the beginning, the label was involved. Now
Right.
it's like you have a finished product and you shop it around.
Right.
You don't get an advance. I mean, I'm sure, if you're an young band or whatever, I'm sure everything's different. But in general, it's, now it's a finished product. You have to have
Yeah.
it done. The record label it's all they can do to distribute it and manufacture it. And actually, that's a big help. That's to me, that's enough. If a record label can do that, that's enough of a help.
Okay. Um, Now I was actually kind of curious why, like I know that the last record that you had out, Dangerous Visions, came out in 2020, 2020. Um, so I was just like, what's Mark doing? Why is he gonna come on the show and talk to me? And then I realized it seems that you're actually going to be doing some reissues soon.
Well, we're hoping to. We began this reissue project. The first four records came out. Our first EP and Bringing Home the Bait, Cloud One, and Pusherman EP, a cover of Curtis Mayfield's Pusherman. And in the process, we were working towards all eight of the original releases of Live Skulls to come out. In the process, Tom and I, the other founding guitarist, we basically wrote a whole history of the band, be like 124 pages of booklets and CDs through covering each album. So the first out, we basically finished all of them, but the label went out of business after releasing the first four. So the other
Oh,
four are in the works, but it's going to be a different label. But included in those reissues, I mean, if you can find them, I mean, they have 10 extra tracks each record included as a download. The CDs have them on it. And a 24-page booklet with photographs, posters, and a history of basically the New York music scene through the eyes of Live Skull.
hmm.
So and they've been mastered correctly and pressed correctly. So they sound without we didn't change the sound of anything, but they
Okay.
sound like the master tapes for the first time. We never had good pressings. It was so disappointing, the albums, every single one of them almost
Oh,
quality wise.
yeah. Wow.
Um, that the reissues sound great. And I'm so happy with them. And it's funny, I was doing the remastering um at the Magic Shop in Soho while Bowie was upstairs recording his last album. So
Oh, really?
it's kind
Oh,
of amazing because he lives nearby, and that studio is in Soho, right down the street from where I live. And he and Iman had this loft a couple blocks away. So
hmm.
yeah, so that was kind of fun. I felt it was like, oh yeah, we're back in the day, Bowie's here.
Yeah, huh? Wow, that's wild.
But yeah, so we're working on that. But frankly, during, I mean, COVID happened in 2020, right?
All
So
right.
for a while, I was locked out of my studio for one, and then eventually, when we could get together, people, how it was in that time. But Live Skull did manage to record a new album.
Oh,
So we
okay.
have a new album that is recorded, mixed, mastered, done. We're preparing for the release now. So we have
Oh, okay.
the Dangerous Visions, our last record, was only half an album, really, because the other side was the BBC sessions from 1989,
Oh, right.
London,
Yeah.
the John Peel sessions.
Was Talia singing on those?
Yep.
I spoke with Talia Zedek.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Unfortunately, she picked my favorite album, Junkyard, the birthday party. It's funny. Once I saw that she picked that, I was like, this is exactly why we all got together, Live Skull and Talia.
Yeah.
It's crazy because Live Skull was so peculiar and specific in our aesthetic that the whole reason Tom and I played guitar, we didn't even play guitar when we started. We came to New York, started a new band, and put an ad in the Voice looking for punk funk guitarists. Punk
Hmm.
funk. I think that's probably the first time there was ever an ad with those two words, except maybe in London or something, or Manchester. Um,
Yeah.
but we got every single prominent alternative guitarist in New York to come and audition for us,
Really? Wow.
and including, Vernon Reed
Oh, yeah. That's
and
crazy.
others too. And that will go unnamed because we didn't choose any of them. We were we felt that no one had been listening to The Fall, The Wire, Cure, Gang of Four, Metal Box, with the way we were, like they were our Bible.
Right.
And so we picked up guitars because we didn't hear anything and we didn't even know how to play. And we picked up guitars and started playing. So Live Skull was such a closed, specific aesthetic. Marnie fit right in right away, amazingly. And
Mm.
then we meeting Talia. I mean, I met her in Boston. She was at a show, and then we played another show in Providence the next night, and there she was again. I'm like, who is this person? And I go up to her and I'm talking to her, and I said, God, you sound like you know a lot about music. Do you play? She goes, yeah, I'm in this band Uzi. And I said, Uzi? You mean the band that we've listened to nonstop for the past year on tour over
Really?
and over again? That Uzi?
Yeah.
She goes, yeah.
Huh.
So I said, you want to come and sing on an EP with Live Skull? We would be honored, and developed from there. But
Right.
now I see why when she chose Junkyard as an important record to her. I see why
Yeah.
we were so
Kindred
aligned
spirits.
aesthetically. Yeah, absolutely.
That's wild. Well, you did make a good choice too. This is pretty great.
Oh,
So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. The first track on the record is Disorder. You kind of already mentioned a little bit about this, and it's a great song. I think it's weird. I think it's a little awkward because, like I was telling you, like that bass line is just so strange, and it
right.
doesn't actually kind of sound too right. And now I'm not gonna. I have this little thing here, but it doesn't necessarily pertain to this song. I don't think. I mean, it probably is more, uh, you know, more about their history in general. But Peter Hook's bass playing. So like that weird style where he kind of like plays in this higher register and kind of goes down to low. I had heard that he kind of developed that out of necessity more so than just kind of his own style because he used to play out of a crappy bass that couldn't stay in
Oh,
tune. So and then also he had a really bad he didn't have a great amp. So in order to be heard over Bernard's guitar, the higher register was just a higher frequency. So it kind of like it stuck out over the guitar at those high levels. So that's kind of one of the things that so he kind of developed this style based on just trying to be heard.
yeah. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one thing I will say that I have read that, or maybe it was in in a book or a movie or something that he was playing. When they were first writing songs, he was playing something high, and Ian Curtis said, "Do that, play that,
Sure. Oh
do
yeah.
that." And I think and another instinctively with such a low voice of Ian, then he's not going to compete with the bass as much when you have that high bass sound.
That's true.
But aside from the bass, I mean, to me, what about just the way it begins with this drum pattern that is not a drum machine and not a drum kit?
Oh right.
It's like, oh, it sounds like there's kind of a synth sound in there. There's kind of a drum machine feel, but it seems like it's played right away. You're in new territory. And
Hmm.
it's so great to hear something new, something fresh. And even before the bass line comes in, okay, we're already in fresh territory. And then that high, really rhythmic bass playing, yeah, where is that from? So yeah, right away I feel like you're feeling something fresh and unusual.
Mm.
And then when the guitar comes in, it's just like, wow, that's just the perfect lick at the perfect time and the perfect rhythm.
Yeah.
It just builds and it's already got you. You're already into the record right away within like a couple measures.
Well, either you're in or you're not.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
by that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
you're this like I don't want to go any further with this, or
Right.
you're
Right.
completely
Right.
immersed.
Right. Right.
So, so what was something that like uniquely led to the composition of a live skull song, like something kind of awkward and unique, kind of like that situation where Peter Hook had to kind of like make something out of necessity.
Um, I think I'm not sure. I mean, Live Skull. Well, Marnie, first of all, played a fretless bass.
Okay.
and she had no music experience. But we were all listening to these records. In fact, before we I moved into a loft in NoHo, which was about 4 blocks from CBGB's. At the time, we could practice in my loft. It was a just big, huge space,
Hmm.
and somehow neighbors didn't care in those days, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and we could walk our equipment from my loft to CBGB's when we played there.
Oh
And
wow.
after sound check, we would just walk to my back to my house, and Marnie and I would, and you know, just as we were just friends, but we would sit like in the dark in my loft. And I had my brother used to do professional sound and slideshows and stuff. We had this like sound system, huge sound system, and we would play like Unknown Pleasures or a fall record really loud and just sit there and take it in. Um, and like I said, we were learning to play. So Marnie's bass lines tended to be have awkward structures in them just because she had never been taught otherwise.
Hmm.
Um, and an example, a strange example. Actually, we're now in Life Skull. We're starting to do some older songs, especially ones that we never played much,
Hmm.
which was like the first EP. We're now doing the song "Mr. Evil,"
Okay.
and it's been very it's been hard to just do the beginning of the song because Marnie comes in like not on the one but like on the two. She it's just the way
Yeah.
she hears it.
Right.
And that's kind of an example, but it's so important. If you don't do that, it makes the whole song, even though it's just the intro, sound normal.
Right.
The
Right.
fact that she starts out coming in at an unusual moment sets you, it perks your ears up right away, like, oh, this is weird, this is different. And then it sustains that the whole song. And it's very important. We were gonna let it go because it was easier not to do. It was an
Right.
accident in the recording session, really. It's just
Right. Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know,
Happy
and
accident.
yeah. So I mean that's an example of, a bass line that I think. But I think all of them can be a little awkward. I mean, we have one of my favorite songs, Back in the Earth, a song that actually John Zorn used to cover back in the day, which was really wild.
Yeah.
Covering a live skull song. I was like, where did that come from? But that has this like lumbering bass line that kind of feels like it stops in its tracks, but
Hmm.
keeps without pausing. You're always like wondering how it's going to make it around its passage, but that very aspect of that gives it like a lot of heavy energy, I think.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds great. Yeah, those are pretty good examples. Let's move on to the next song, Day of the Lords. So, Day of the Lords, I don't have anything necessarily specific to the song, but I was doing some research and I came across the Lord's Day in Christianity is generally Sunday, the principal day of communal worship. And I know that the band Joy Division had few scheduled rehearsal times, and one of the main days that they rehearsed was Sunday.
Uh,
So, what does Live Skull rehearsal schedule look like?
yeah. Well, I mean, back in the day, we tried to rehearse like 3 times a week. But we had to do it I think, well, I think we did it any 3 days, but I think they were usually weekdays, late afternoon, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I remember later I was in a band that rehearsed in the morning because we had to, and it was kind of really interesting, refreshing. And I think at some point I was talking to Lee or Thurston from Sonic Youth, and I think they were saying, yeah, they rehearse during the day, which
Weird.
to me I was like, so first of all, I'm a night person. I used to DJ after hours, and to me it's like you hear bands at night, so you should practice at night, I think.
Hmm.
But actually I think we used to practice late afternoons. And but Day of the Lords, it's such a heavy song after that first song being a little quirky, like you were saying, and having that kind of almost like drum machine kind of pattern on the drums, but it still gets kind of heavy at the end with the lyrics, the spirit, and he's screaming kind of.
All right.
But then Day of the Lords is full on heavy, distorted bass. And then these spooky keyboards and just this fragile little guitar line. And I wrote down a couple of words. I've seen nights filled with blood, sport, and pain. Where will it end?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Oh
it's
yeah.
just like, wow, this is the second song on the album, and they're
Yeah.
getting very heavy, very.
Right. Yeah, no, there's something else that I found that there's also the Day of the Lord is a biblical term and theme used in both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. And there's a quote where it says, "The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and the terrible day of the Lord come." So I think it's possible that this song has something to do with that, like a kind of
Uh,
a kind of
uh,
yeah, I don't know.
I think the whole record is like a reckoning with what it is to be alive and knowing that you're going to die. I mean,
Hmm.
and I think, you know, I've been waiting for a guy to come and take me by the hand. In my mind, that was always like, you know, someone that was going to lead you into the afterlife, so it's not so freaky or scary or
Right.
whatever.
Kind of like why
And
people look toward to Jesus.
yeah, exactly. But this
Right.
is to me, and they use a lot of religious you know, like Day of the Lords, a lot of religious metaphors, but I don't feel like it's religious at all. It's spiritual, but
It could be
not
misinterpreted
religious.
as such, because I mean, what's the difference between believing in religion and believing just having a spiritual
Yeah.
belief?
Well,
Because like I'm not religious, but I feel like there's something spiritual in the world that is kind of
yeah,
connecting all of us.
yeah. I feel the same way, but religion is something else, especially organized religion.
But it's
It's
all about what you believe,
right.
right?
It's about what you believe, but if you just go for spirituality, it's something you feel or experience. It's not something you're told by someone else. I feel like organized religion, people are told what to believe, what to do, and there's always another agenda in the background. First of
Sure.
all, they want money.
Well,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? It's like, and it's led to so many horrifying wars and everything else. But
right.
uh, so I really think it's important in this album to realize that there's a lot, you know, there's a lot of religious uh, uh, reflection in a way, but it's a different. It's not an organized religion kind of religious, but he's trying to deal with the same big themes that religion tries to answer for people, so they're not so freaked out about life,
Hmm.
be scared. You know,
Sure.
who's Jesus, right? So I think this album they're dealing with those themes, the big themes. So religion is an obvious place to use some metaphor.
Right. Okay. Well, with that being said, let's skip on to not the next song, but the song after that, Insight.
Yeah, that um first of all, the thing about this album for me, obviously I'm a big fan,
Hmm.
is that every time you hear a great song, there's another one coming. I mean, for me, the first song right off the bat is amazing.
Yeah.
Just its perkiness and it's just everything. And then that second heavy, heavy song. And now Insight with you know, is just it's so like moody and to me it's almost like the morning after some apocalyptic storm. And
Yeah.
you've survived, the sun's coming out. You guess your dreams always end. They don't rise up, just descend, but I don't care anymore. It's just like I've already been through everything. How old was he? 20 something?
Yeah.
He,
He can have been more than that.
he talks like an ancient, like an elder, like someone that has already been through all the trauma of life that you experience in a lifetime.
Right.
What next? What do I do with it? What does it mean? You know, I mean, I have this weird thing about people that die young.
Hmm.
Feel like often somehow they know it somewhere. That's why they do such great work early on and in such a compact time period. I'm thinking
Hmm.
about Nirvana here,
Right.
you know, and Jimi Hendrix and
Sure.
Jim Morrison
Yeah. Well,
and
there's the
Janis
whole 27
Joplin.
club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like they and a lot of artists in New York, especially like one backdrop to everything I did in music was it was during the time of AIDS. And I was in San Francisco, which had a huge gay culture and total free for all sexually.
Hmm.
I watched a lot of people get sick, and coming to New York, it was not much better. And a lot of big artists died young,
Yeah.
not just musicians, not just the
Oh
20
yeah.
Club,
Right.
Keith Haring and Basquiat and
Right.
David Honorovich, all these people that I knew that lived down the street from me. They were all dying young, but they did this immense amount of work before they died. So anyway, I just think somehow these people that, like I'm talking about him, he's talking like an elder. It's kind of somewhere in the back of the mind. I feel like they've already lived their whole life and they kind of know it. And
Right. Yeah, yeah. And we'll probably touch on that because I mean obviously there's the tragic story of Ian Curtis for anyone that might be listening that doesn't know. Um there he the weird part about his demise was that like you're saying it seems like he had some inkling that like a young person might have this sense of they know that it might be coming for them too soon, and so they somehow just managed to kind of manifest all of this art that they want to get out into the world as quickly as possible. And he had developed epilepsy and was having seizures. And I think like I actually watched that biopic recently, Control, which it seems to be pretty accurate.
yeah, it really does.
Yeah, it seems like they like minus like having to skip over sections just for continuity's sake. It seems like what they depicted was fairly accurate to
Yeah.
the history. And there's that problem where we're going to hit that this topic when we get to She's Lost Control, but the idea that he saw what epilepsy looked like and unfortunately saw somebody pass away to it, from having a fit or a seizure. Um, it must have been like something that switched in him that was just like, oh, that could be me now.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, the psychedelic part of add into the fact that he, first of all, his music, which they all seem to love doing, is starting to become really big and
Yeah,
getting a
right.
lot of attention. So
Hmm.
that's a lot to deal with on its own, first of all, because your whole life is changing.
Right,
The touring, there's all the attention, you're meeting all these people. I mean, he's already married, I think, with a kid,
right,
and now he's suddenly meeting tons of interesting exotic people that worship him, you know what I mean? On top, so at the same time that's happening, suddenly he has this horror story of these fits on stage in front of people.
right,
You work so hard to have this perfect performance or this, watchable performance, and then you're going to be, having a fit on stage. I mean, I just can't imagine what kind of heartbreak that is going on inside of you
right. Yeah, I mean, there's so much. There's so much that he had. It seems like there was
simultaneously.
so much that he had to going on inside of him.
Yeah.
Realizing that he has a finite time, possibly due to his illness, his unhappiness in his marriage because he just got married too young. It was just not a great idea to get married and have a kid, before you're 20.
Yeah, and especially if you're gonna be touring as a rock star, you know,
Right, right. And I don't think
that
he
makes
knew
it even
that.
more difficult, really. I mean, maybe if you stayed in your small town, in your little community, it might be a little
Yeah.
different. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
no, I got married and had kids, later in life, and now I'm just like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't mind not being in a band anymore. I
right,
don't.
right,
It's like it's fine. Like, I'm not gonna get out. I'm not trying to get out there and get away from my family just so I can kind of be a rock and roll star again. It's just like it is what it is. But for him at that time, I think that it kind of overlapped. Like not it didn't overlap perfectly. It was just like because he started the band after marriage and kind of knowing about a pregnancy on the way, and then had no idea it was going to be that. It's just like if he could have just been like, well, we're just doing the band because I'm just going to play the gigs locally anyway, not a big deal. But then getting the attention and having to tour and try to make something of it, it's kind of like took precedent especially because of the mortality issue, like knowing he might not be around long enough, wanting to get that out before he passes. So yeah, it's just fraught with just tragedy, really.
Yeah, so sad. Such a sad story. I mean, you know, just like reserving my copy of Unknown Pleasures at the record store in Berkeley, I had precious tickets to see Joy Division play in New York, first tour
Oh
of America, tier three, which is, I don't remember how many people they fit, but 150
yeah,
maybe.
right.
And I had my ticket to see Joy Division, and I just couldn't believe it.
That sucks.
Yeah,
Wow.
unbelievable. And they postponed the show and came over for the first New Order show before they were really New Order. They weren't playing New Order style music. They were playing Joy Division basically without lyrics, without vocals. And they
Okay.
opened for a certain ratio. And, they're obviously a headlining band, but now they don't have their singer. What does it mean?
Right.
And that was one of the most intense shows I've ever seen. It was so emotionally intense when they played. It was just like all the energy of the music was just being thrown out there. Really intense to see. But I was
Wow.
almost got to see. I had a friend who went to England to see a Gang of Four and Joy Division. They brought me back a live cassette tape of two shows. So I was really excited to see them, but
Wow.
he
Well,
didn't
I'm
see.
sorry that you didn't get to. I mean,
I
I
know,
think
so
I think
close.
I think everyone's sorry that you didn't get to because it's just a shame to lose, such immense talent,
Yeah, really sad. But yeah, but we were waiting. We were ready. We had our tickets.
Yeah, wow. You seem to be like right there, man. You seem to have like been at the right place at the right time throughout history,
Well,
musical history.
for this one genre, it just
Sure. Yeah.
and it really was and like I say, I didn't really one thing I missed out on was the precursors to punk because like as just a music fan and not a musician, I lost track a little bit of music in terms of making it so important to me, and I was doing other things. So I didn't really. I feel like I missed out a little bit on like the New York Dolls, the Stooges,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
precursors to punk, which later on I went back and were amazed by. But yes, I was for this stuff as a novice musician. I was so it fit my aesthetic so much, and Tom as well, who's the other guitarist in Live Skull, and we kind of moved to New York together from San Francisco, and yeah, we were this music we were stuck on this music, so uh,
Hmm.
we were paying close attention to anybody that was in this nascent post punk,
Yeah. Well, either way, I would say that you definitely got in at a good time, regardless of what you missed.
and not only that, and people talk about the '80s in New York for good reason because the explosion in art. I mean, there was Cindy Sherman and photography for the first time. Photography was being accepted in the art world. It was no longer a hobby or a
Right.
craft. Now it was an
Uh-huh.
art form. There was graffiti art, which was suddenly becoming huge, and so post punk was competing with all these things, being influenced by all these things, and being connected by all these things.
Hmm.
Um, and it made for a very vibrant scene, and that's like the first time I saw Sonic Youth, I was like, what is this? It was so sonic and so all those influences of New York. And I remember as soon as they got off stage, the first thing the DJ played was a New York downtown club hit, a funk song. And
Hmm.
it's just like, I love this world. It's an
Yeah.
open world. It has so many avenues to go in, but it still has this personal, intense, non commercial music at the core. And
Right.
even hip hop was non-commercial at the time.
Oh yeah.
So it was a completely non-commercial movement, but there was such a congregation of artists that were so interested in new art that it just created this energy.
Yeah. Well, like I said, sounds like you were there at a great time. All right, well, we should move on to the next song, New Dawn Fades.
Uh, yeah, and I mean, another example of have you heard all the best songs on this record yet? And now this song comes on, and look at the first two lines: a change of speed, a change of style, a change of scene. Yes, this is something new. They're going for something new here, and the sound is new.
Hmm.
And I think and it's and it ends. It goes to a loaded gun won't set you free. It's just like those same heavy subjects, and I just love the chord progression in this song.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
so I don't. It just seems to be like it's so grounded. And one thing about this song, like obviously Live Skull was very influenced by this whole post-punk, these bands, these early post-punk bands, at least for inspiration to want to play music, because finally we're like, oh, this is music that's artistic expression. It's not
Mhm.
just who's the best guitarist or who can sing and dance the best. It's let's make an artistic statement and do it in a heavy way. And uh when Live Skull reformed. We reformed about 4 years ago by accident. We got
Mhm.
three of us got together to celebrate Martin BC's studio. I think it was 30th anniversary, where we had recorded all our records, most of our records in the
Right.
80s. He recorded Sonic Youth and everybody, Swans, even
Yeah.
Ruby Hancock, and etc. Um, and when we got back together in the same room to rehearse for this event, it was Rich Hutchins, who was the second Live Skull drummer, and Marnie, the original bass player, and me. And instantly, we started writing material.
Hmm.
It was just like, that's why we were meant to play together. And in the middle of this song, which is called Details of the Madness, we're playing, and spontaneously, in the middle of the song, we go into New Dawn Fades. No intention, no, I mean, basically, I heard Marnie going a little there. I said, it's just like, Marnie, that's yes, keep playing that. And actually on the record, it's our first record since the 80s, Saturday Night Massacre.
Right.
Uh Details of the Madness, the ending is basically don't tell anyone.
I won't. Your
But the
secret's
whole
safe with
I
me.
mean, it shows you how how well known we are, that we haven't gotten a million people complaining. What are you doing covering Joy Division in the middle of a song? But yeah, the whole ending of the song basically is our weird version of an interpretation, because we never listened to the song or tried to imitate it.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
definitely the basic song, the basic chord structure of New Dawn Fades. And the fact that we went into it, it just to me, it brought back to where Live Skull came from, where we're still at. We're still trying to do the same thing, make art that's atmospheric, moves you, and has personality. But yeah, but it was funny. I thought about that after I picked this record. I was like, oh, there's a pretty strong connection that we actually just spontaneously go into this song that I hadn't played the record in 20 years, maybe. And
Right.
I don't think Marnie and Rich barely knows the record. So it was really it was just meant to be.
Yeah, very interesting. I was going to ask you a question about this song, but you kind of like already touched on a little bit of it because I have this quote here from from Peter Hook, who was just kind of talking about this song and kind of he was kind of discussing some of his favorite bass lines, and this one being, I think, the third uh, of his choice. And it says that I suppose the next one would be the same sort of formula, which is New Dawn Fade. So this is the one that is very simple. The chord sequence of the bass is dead simple right the way through. And my trademark in the early days was playing the same bass line right the way through the whole song. I think that's an English thing, right the way. And everybody else would move around it. So this song is like that.
Oh,
So so simple, so powerful, you know?
yeah.
Is this a formula when that you look to when writing?
Um, I I have to say that I write for me. What I loved about Live Skull was we always had bass players with very strong uh riffs, bass riffs. They
Hmm.
both Marnie and Sonda, they they had the same sense of wanting the bass line to be a lead instrument. That's kind of what we haven't said. Joy Division, the bass is a lead instrument.
Yeah.
They're all lead instruments in this band, but the bass is very much a lead instrument. And I found that for writing guitar parts, for making music that's not so obvious, if it starts from the bass line, tends to be more grounded. I mean, later in my music career, as I didn't always have bands or whatever, and I learned how more to write music the traditional way. You write it on guitar through chords,
Hmm.
make songs. That's way different from having being in a room with someone playing a really loud bass line that they're still working out, and then you start getting the feel and start adding to it. That process is like you get to see that process is more open ended, and I think it produces results that are more listenable long term. Unless you're a genius like Dylan or something, where you can write a song that someone wants to hear over and over again. Otherwise, this way of writing from the bass line first, the prominent bass line, that's the most grounded thing, and then the other stuff can make it, keep it interesting, take it and move it slightly in different directions. And you have a more complicated, dense end result than if you have someone that writes a song, lyrics and chords, and comes in, brings them in, and has everyone play along.
Right.
It's just not
Okay.
going to be as interesting. So I think
I
this is
can
a
agree
really
with
good
that.
formula
Yeah.
for writing, and Live Skull exploited it. And we just naturally did it that way. I don't know if Joy Division did it that way, but I'm just saying that to me that it points to, and it sounds in their music like that's the case.
I think you're right. I mean, that definitely would seem to make sense, especially with the kind of the way that you're explaining it. The bass is being is such a lead, and then like you can tell with like the way that Bernard plays guitar over that it's very atmospheric. And I know that the Martin Hannett production probably had something to do with it because they wanted to be a punk band. They wanted to be like the Sex Pistols essentially. Um, but Martin Hannett's production is basically what brought them into this very different realm. Um, so I mean, I think that he's kind of has to take a lot of credit for
Yeah,
what Joy Division became.
yeah, I think so. And um, I mean, a couple things I always wondered. First of all, is there a, they always complained about the mix of this album.
Sure.
Did they ever remix it? Is there a version?
There's a
Like,
remastered. There's a
yeah,
2019
remastered, but
remaster.
not remixed, really. I mean,
Yeah.
like Ridley Scott did Blade Runner, the
Sure. The
edit,
director's cut. Yeah.
director's cut, right? And it's different. Yeah, I always wondered if they're why didn't they just do a remix? Let's hear how the Beatles
Yeah.
Naked, right? Let It Be Naked. They
Sure.
were always bummed about all this shit that was added to that, all the extra,
Well,
orchestration.
I think that from what I had read, it seems that I can't remember which members. I think it was like kind of half and half. Like half of them like really liked the finished product, and
Okay,
then half of them didn't.
okay,
Now, I think that ultimately what has been said since, all of these years afterwards is that as much as they didn't, I'm gonna assume it was Bernard that said that didn't agree with the mix originally. Um, but after all these years, it has proven to
right,
be a masterpiece, and then so he kind of can't mess with it
right.
now.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, some of those like extra like bonus content things. I'm not. I'm
Yeah,
kind of a purist when it comes to a record. Like, I kind of want the original
yeah,
record
yeah,
as whenever I
exactly.
can. Like,
Yeah,
bonus
absolutely.
tracks is okay, and then when you start getting into like remixing and remastering, I'm just like, okay, now
Or
you're just
adding songs to an album,
yeah,
we this was recorded at the same time and we really meant to be on. No, that's not the album anymore.
right, yeah, no. So
I
you missed
agree
your
with you.
opportunity.
I
Just put
mean,
it on something's up.
I basically could barely stand reissues. Period. I want,
Yeah,
I want the original, and that's why. And now I feel weird saying that the Live Skull reissues sound better than the originals, but the fact was it was cheap. They were cheaply done. So
right.
just having them done correctly, and still not fancy, but it's just a little bit better. But
Sure.
yeah, no, but I know what you're saying. I like having the originals because there's always something there that you might miss out on, and it's history, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's the fact.
So, right. And with those things being said, I'm actually going to skip a couple songs, and I kind of wanted to actually not keep this too long. So,
Okay.
I think maybe let's do one more song. And based on what you were saying, I kind of wanted to go to Interzone.
Okay.
So
Um,
now, this track was originally styled on the backing track of "Keep On Keeping On" by Nolan Porter.
oh,
The band attempted to record the song for a demo commissioned by RCA Records, but after struggling to replicate the song because it's a completely different genre of style of music that they had no business being involved with, um, Bernard Sumner took the riff, inverted it, and played it faster, and then the band presented RCA with Interzone.
ah. You know, well, two things off the bat. First of all, Inner Zone, I think was an alternative title to Naked Lunch, William Burroughs' book. I don't know if they meant it. That's one thing about the song. The other thing is this is one where Bernard sings the main, right? And then Ian Curtis does the backup vocals. Is that the song where it's like a give and take, acted by
Yes.
a force within it? And I was looking for a friend of mine, and he died some time ago.
Right.
And the thing is that, I mean, one thing I have to say about the song is Bernard's singing it, Ian Curtis is doing backup, but he's almost doing an entire song on top of it. Ian Curtis had so much to say. That's the thing about this album. That's what you get from this album. Like he had a lot to say. He was trying to say a lot to the point where here's a song that had was fine even without backup vocals, but he had to add more
Right.
because that's how much he had to say. And I mean, they're overlapping, almost making them unintelligible, but it also gives this real drama of like the song is fast, like you were saying, it was speeded up in a way, version of an original riff. And then this give and take between the two vocals, just it's like a horse race. Someone's edging, who's edging each other forward. And it's just creates this great tension and drama, which just drives the music. So much of this album is driving, driving, driving. And
Right.
that here we're near the end of the album and they're even going faster.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's very interesting what you were mentioning because I wasn't like I remember hearing that in the song, and then I was like kind of listening along, like looking at the lyrics while the music was playing, and I heard that backing vocal that was kind of like it's almost ghosting
Yeah,
the
yeah,
vocal, right? So and it's
yeah,
like and it's different words, and
yeah.
so they weren't even listed in the lyrics I was reading. I was just like, wait, so what is he saying over here? There's a whole other story that's happening behind this song.
No, I mean, I mean, some people struggle to write lyrics, or happy to have someone else do a song so they don't have to come up with lyrics. But no, Ian
Right,
Curtis, he had a lot to say. He had to get it all out. He wasn't
right.
going to be around that long.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Well,
plus he had
I don't know what it is, but and they that on the first EP, well, I have the 12-inch version, but I guess it's the same on the Ideal for Living, I think it's
right
called.
the four songs. Yep.
Yeah, they have that give and take on a few songs, and it's very dramatic.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
so to hear it here again in a subtler way, it's less. I mean, on the EP, it's really a part of the important part of the song. Here, it's like important, but it's down in the mix, so it doesn't seem as important as it actually is.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Now, because of this song and because of what I mentioned to you about how they kind of like came up with this song based on a song that they were actually trying to cover,
Yeah.
um, I don't know if you've ever thought about it before, but do you think there is a song in your catalog that you either had directly lifted like direct inspiration from like this or more subliminally?
Um, we only ever recorded one cover. We actually did do a cover, which was Pusher Man, Curtis Mayfield's Pusher Man.
Okay.
It's kind of in reverse of what Bernard did here because two things happened. First of all, we didn't bother to listen to the song before we did it. So it's just what we remembered from our youth, hearing it on the radio. And we're
Okay.
not trained musicians. I mean, trained musicians, they hear a song, they can play it. No,
Sure.
we can't do that. We didn't do that. So a couple things happened. First of all, the we didn't get any change. We just got the basic bass line, which is kind of similar to the original, but it's slowed down. Instead of speeded up, it's slowed down and played in a more bluesy fashion instead of a Motowny
Yeah,
fashion,
funkish.
upbeat, funkish. It's more like laid back and heavy. And then even the lyrics, Marnie basically mixed two songs together, Freddie's Dead and Pusher Man. None of us noticed or even bothered to check.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a collage of those two songs. So
Okay.
I've thought about that a lot, but we never really did that. But we were we were learning to play, so in our minds we were imitating the Fall and imitating the Cure and imitating Joy Division every time we played.
Right.
We didn't know anything else. That was our entire musical repertoire. As far as it's funny, we'd been listening to music our whole life, but when it came to playing, we had our blinders on. It was just this post-punk bands, basically.
Right. Okay. Well, cool. I mean, I think that's a great place to put this album to rest.
Great.
Don't want to get into the last track anyway. Way too heavy.
And we didn't talk about She's Lost Control.
Well, because we already kind of did. Like, I kind of you know, shared the story, the background of kind of where the inspiration for that song came from, essentially, and it was the whole epilepsy thing. He
And one thing I wanted to say, though, about that,
sure.
because there's that lyric. First of all, I said before, the song, the album opens with, I've been waiting for God to come and take me by the hand.
Hmm.
By the time she's lost control, it's she came and took me by the hand and said, I've lost control. So when you first think of
Mm.
a guide, you're expecting someone that's going to be able to get you through the chaos, get you through the wilderness, and lead you to your destination. Well, his guide is someone that's screaming, kicking on her side,
Mm.
claiming she lost control. And this idea in art that you can't control it. You don't know where it's going to go. It's inspiration. It's chaos. That's the one of the lessons from No Wave. Chaos can be corralled. We had this saying early in Live Skull. We put this quote that was a made up quote, harnessing chaos for their own beliefs. That was our first press release. And I
Yeah.
feel like here these guys were doing the same thing, and Ridley Scott was doing similar thing. It's like trying to open up to all these unknown things, unknown pleasures. Let's talk about the title of the album, Unknown Pleasures.
Right.
It's like you're in new territory here that might turn out very bad, might be static. You don't know. It's probably going to be all these things. And you're not really going to get a decent guide to guide you through it.
Right.
That's how scary life can be if you really dig down into it. And I think they're going for that in this record.
I would say that that's a fair assessment, and I really appreciated it. I really admire it. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your insight into this record. I mean, it's been not only has your interpretation been eye opening to this album, but just having to sit with this record for as long as I have and really kind of get into it much more than I ever have before. It's a little dark, sure. It's been a little depressing. It's been a little kind of challenging to kind of put myself into this place so often and so many times, but well worth it, I think.
Intriguing, right?
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I'm surprised that this hasn't actually been chosen before, and
Oh,
I couldn't think of a better person to talk to about this record than you.
oh,
I think thank you very much, Mark.
yeah, thank you. Really great talking with you.
Is there anything going on that we need to know about quickly before we sign off, as
Uh,
far as the band is concerned?
well, yeah, look for this new album, tentatively called Party Zero. Uh,
Okay.
it's all new tracks, 10 new tracks for the first time with our current lineup written together.
Yep.
Um, uh, so I'm really excited because I feel like now Live Skull's become a real band again. And this is the new the new lineup, and it's all new material, and it was written together, and we recorded it together, produced it ourselves. So
Mhm.
I feel like yeah, we're back in the game.
That's cool, man. And when can we expect that record?
Hopefully by April, May.
Okay,
you know.
perfect.
Great.
All right, Mark. Well, it's been a pleasure, man.
Same.